I gotta ask too, like, okay, so you lived, you, what was the island you grew up in?
It was St. Martin, and I lived there for about 2.5 years between 14 and 16. And then I came back to the US, got my GED. And then from 17 and onward, that's when I started powerlifting. Yeah, 17. That's why I really got into it.
You grew up in New York, right?
I grew up in New York, and I only left back pre-pandemic. I left in late 2018 to go to LA. I was there 3, 4 months, and that seemed like to be the hub for being a fitness influencer at the time. Is it still? I don't know. I don't know, but the homeless problem seems to be horrendous. So I don't know where that hub might be now. I want to say it could be Dubai, at least for internationals. So back to LA. I was there for 3 months. Then I moved to Iceland in January, and then in March I moved to Dubai for an opportunity here to learn strongman from a recognized coach. And it was all inclusive, everything paid for, 6 week trip at a 5-star hotel. I was like, yeah, hell yeah. And at the time, Dubai was like Narnia to me. Coming from like I had never really traveled much before this. Before Dubai, I've been to like London, Paris, Italy, and like China and Tokyo. But those are all like really short trips. So Dubai seemed like so foreign to me, and I was like, yeah, hell yeah. And then once I got here, I looked back at LA. Like I just got a lease on my apartment as well, and I canceled the lease straight away. Paid the termination fee. Like okay, we just stayed in Dubai. It made so much sense because we had intended on doing traveling every single month, going to everywhere, making collabs with everyone. And it ended up being that we went nowhere due to the pandemic. So we were lucky enough that everyone was coming to us because Dubai was one of the only countries that, there was no real strict COVID restriction. So a lot of foreigners can come here to Dubai and use it actually as like a haven because they maybe were in lockdown in their own country. Because we were one of the first countries to go into lockdown and also come out of lockdown. And, this went on for a long time. And that's actually what have made some of the most significant gains on our YouTube channel during the pandemic because we were doing, so many collabs. And like we had stayed in LA, all the gyms were closed, I think, except for Zoo Culture. So what it would have been like for collabs and growing the channel during the pandemic if we were to stay in LA, I don't know. But I know that going to Dubai and even to this day onward is a really good decision for growing my channel. Hence why we're still here.
What's your favorite things about Dubai? Like, obviously, I'm sure you like the weather and all that. Maybe it's too hot, though. I don't know. But what are your favorite things about it?
I mean, dude, it's super hot. It's like 100 degrees plus 80% humidity day in and day out here. And it's not even summer yet. It gets even worse in the summer, like a buck 20 to 30 every day. 100% humidity, but it doesn't rain. It's never cloudy. There's no change of season or weather. I'm really selling, aren't I? The winters are incredible. The winters are there's nothing better than Dubai winter in the world. I think Dubai winter is the best place to be. But what I love most about it, and I tell everyone this, is how safe and how clean it is. Coming from New York is filthy. There's garbage in the streets. There's homeless everywhere, for the subway at least, and it's stinky for the most part. It's congested. It's really unsafe. You have that feeling that you always need to look over your shoulder in New York, right? Like who's walking behind you, who's around you. You have to be quite observant and on your toes in New York. And in Dubai, you never have to deal with that. I mean, you can leave your phone anywhere; no one will take it. There's no garbage in the street. There's no smell. It's just like a bubble. It's just really safe and really clean here. If there's anywhere I want to raise children, it would definitely be Dubai. I'd feel safe if they were to walk to school and back alone, kind of a thing. I live in a villa now in a nice neighborhood full of young families. And growing up in New York, I always lived in apartments, and I never thought I'd live in a house because I was like in the U.S. It just seems so unsafe to be in a house because anyone can enter your house. They can easily break into the window or the balcony door, for example, or they can, see when you leave, when you come and go. It always seems so unsafe to live in a home in the U.S. versus an apartment because I'm like, who's going to break into my apartment in New York or L.A., for example? But in Dubai, I don't think about these things. I can leave my door unlocked. I lock it though, in case you know where I live. I do lock my door. I can leave, my windows on open, for example, and come and go. And like everything's gonna be where I left it. I don't have to worry about anyone breaking in and murdering me. It's like that kind of safety, you know, and that makes me feel really comfortable here. And I never had that feeling anywhere else I've lived. Granted, that's only been New York and LA very briefly. But this is the kind of place where you can really settle down and you can raise kids. You know, this is the kind of vibe that it gives.
Wow. Okay. I feel like you feel like LA sucks too. Was it pretty bad, or what was it like?
It was. I mean, look, I mean, coming from New York, everyone kind of has like a chip on their shoulder. Everyone's in a rush. LA, the one thing I liked most about it was not like that at all. The overall attitude I felt in LA was people seemed to be happier in general, more polite, more friendly. You know, you can ask a stranger what time it is, and once they go fuck yourself. So it was like, like in that respect, LA was really cool. You know, the overall attitude was nice. But besides that, traffic was really frustrating. I chose to live in downtown LA, my mistake. And I would go to Zoo Culture, which was in Woodland Hills, and that was like an hour and a half. Not because it was long, sorry, a long drive, a far drive, but because it was in standstill traffic the whole way there and the whole way back. And you know, that really put me off. Like I can get to the gym now in 10 minutes where I'm at in Dubai. Like it's just ultra convenient. And if I lived in Woodland Hills next to Zoo Culture, that could be the same case. But you know, I'm not growing up there. I didn't know where to move, so I just moved into what was familiar, which was living in an apartment in like the big city part of LA, which was downtown LA. But the homeless, I mean, I lived super close to Skid Row in downtown, so I would drive by that every day, and it's really depressing to see that. And you know, in New York, we have shelters. You know, they have plenty of places to go for hot food and everything. So they're not exactly taken care of, but they have options for like having a roof over the head, a bed to stay at night, food, hot food when they need it, provided that they show up on time. But in LA, they're just like in the street, in tents, you know, everywhere. And this was pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, like now I hear it's so much worse. Everyone who's been from Dubai that I know who's been to LA recently, you know, says it's terrible there, and that the homeless have like invaded Venice and Santa Monica, and like it's really unsafe, and it's like the last place I really want to be right now. And there's like a mass migration to Texas, like, which I would probably move. If I was moving back to US, it would be Texas. I'd pick probably Houston or Dallas, one of the cities, and move like in the suburbs. That's probably where I would be if I were to go to the US. I would definitely never move back to LA. We'll never say never, but it would be unlikely from what I've been hearing.
Yeah, it's crazy. What about other parts of California? Because like there's the Bay Area, but it's kind of cold. And then San Diego, I've been to the airport. I heard it's kind of nice. And then what you were saying too with Texas, like that's where a lot of people are too. A lot of guys like Russell Ori, Ashton's down there. I think a ton of guys. Johnny Candido, a lot of guys are down there.
Yeah, I mean, just for cost of living, like you can't beat Texas, man. Texas, oh man, your dollar goes a long way. Like bang for buck. I mean, Texas. I mean, considering as well like how close you are to the big cities, you're in the middle of America, so only 3 hours to go either east or west, like New York or LA. If you have any big collabs or anything going on, so I think that would be a smart decision if you are, you know, looking to make your money stretch. Now, I much prefer the scenery and the weather in California in general, like even like San Diego, San Francisco. I've been both, and it's full of suburbs, which I like now that I'm living in a suburb. But the cost of living, man, it's insane. You know, I mean, $1 million home and you get like a 2-bedroom, like maybe like 1,000 square feet home. You know, your money does not stretch at all. So, you know, that, I mean, if I really, really make it, and I would consider, you know, San Diego, San Francisco, but at the moment, like it's just too much. I'd much rather let my dollar go a long way, go to Texas for that same $1 million, where you get a small home in San Diego, San Francisco. You get a mansion in like Waco, Texas, for example. You know, you can be living so much nicer, you know, not to mention the taxes are significantly lower. And yeah, man. So I think Texas would be the place to be, unless you're like loaded.
Well, do you ever
or you're working?
Or you
Sorry. Or I was gonna say, unless like work requires you to be in San Diego, San Francisco. But you know, as of what I do now, I can move just about anywhere that has a good gym. So I would choose Texas.
Well, do you ever think you'll like move back to the States, or are you pretty planted in Dubai?
You know, well, I'll go what the opportunity is. You know, I chase the money, to be honest. So as of now, there's still opportunity in Dubai, but that may change. everything changes inevitably. So if that does change and it happens to be in the U.S., for sure, I would go back to the U.S. Right, and there's no real incentive with taxes being a U.S. citizen in Dubai because you still have to pay the same federal income tax as if you're living in the U.S., which is utter crap. So people can't, and if you're from the US, you can't move here and live tax free, which sucks because I'm surrounded by people from the UK and Europe who move here and live tax free 100%, like you motherfuckers. So, yeah, I don't get that benefit, and you wouldn't either. Anyone else listening from the US, if you move here for that reason, don't do it, like because you're not off the hook. They give you like up to a certain amount of money, like about 100K tax free, but if you're earning excess of that, of course, then you get taxed the same income tax as if you were living in the U.S. So yeah, but it would be Texas. I would have moved back, and it would be Texas. But like I said, I go with the opportunity is. That's
Well,
why I'm still in Dubai.
Dubai's like a central location too, as far as the world. Like it's really right in the middle, so that kind of helps. Now, what's your favorite place you've ever traveled? Because you've been to a few different countries, obviously. You've been to different states. Like it could be states, country. What's your favorite place personally, where you're like, I love it here. I love going here.
I mean, look, if I were to live anywhere, it would be Bel Air. I mean, I think if money was no object, unlimited funds, totally Bel Air. I've been to some really nice homes in Bel Air. And I mean, just the crazy view of all the mountains and so green, and it's just like a fairy tale living, you know. But besides where I live, the place that I visited most, that's been most fun, would be Tokyo. There's like Japanese New York, you know, and it's just so congested, so crowded. It feels like home. There's a lot of familiarity there, so maybe that's why I like it so much, because it feels a lot like New York with how congested everything is and on top of each other everything is. But the food everywhere I went was so good, and it was just the fashion was so different from what I've ever seen. It just felt like a different world, you know, but also familiar at the same time. I really enjoyed my time there. Yeah.
I think Tokyo is pretty safe too, from what I've heard.
Yeah. I've heard the same, and it's supposed to be quite a livable city. And if you were to buy a home there, like they're averaging around like 300 grand for like new modern homes in Tokyo, US dollars, which is, you know, affordable for just about anyone. So like you can, it's not advised. I've watched some videos of Japanese bloggers from Tokyo, and their opinion about like if Americans or foreigners move to Tokyo, it's not a good idea. But like the people there, they get taken care of by the government. They have a lot of opportunity, and yeah, I've read that it's pretty safe. I mean, I've only spent like a week there, so but I felt safe while I was there. You know, yeah, it seems like a safe place to be.
Yeah, I know it too. It's the biggest population for any city in the entire world, like the biggest. So that's kind of
It
crazy.
feels like it. Oh yeah,
It
like
is.
Shibby across. Dude, it's ridiculous.
It's just the
It feels like.
congestion. Is it so which is more congested? Because you've been to like India, you've been to New York City, and you've been to Tokyo. Like what's the most congested area you think?
I'd have to say India, because no matter where you go in India, even the countryside is just too congested. It's like packed like sardines. I mean, there's traffic utterly everywhere. It's just too much. Tokyo, I never felt like it was too congested. And New York, I mean, only in certain pockets of the city does it ever really feel like that, like in Times Square, for example, or like Dumbo and Brooklyn, like or downtown Brooklyn, like those areas can feel really congested. But there's a lot of places in New York City that are like suburb like that are not really congested. That there's empty streets, and the atmosphere is a lot more chill than if you were going to like those really dense pockets of the city. But in Tokyo, it felt more congested overall than New York, because I went to a lot of Tokyo, and everywhere I went it was ridiculous. Like, there'd be one shop, and then there'd be 10 shops on top of that shop, like in a vertical format. It was just like ridiculous, like stuff like that. Like it was really everything just packed on top of each other, like you could not believe. So, and there was no empty streets anywhere. Every street was like hustling and bustling, like everywhere I went. Like there was no peace and quiet there at all. So yeah, Tokyo felt even more congested.